The judge was reaching for his stamp. In 30 seconds, a 12-year marriage would be over. The billionaire husband sat calm and smiling. His lawyer was already thinking about golf. They were offering his pregnant wife $50,000 for 12 years. For a woman 8 months along with no job, no money, and no home to go back to. And then everyone in that courtroom heard a sound that changed everything. A zipper, a tote bag opening, the pregnant woman stood up, pulled out a yellowed envelope, and placed it on the judge's bench. What was inside that envelope would cost her billionaire husband everything. His company, his reputation, his freedom. Because 17 years ago, in a tiny kitchen with a dripping faucet, he made a promise he forgot about. She did not forget. She never forgot. But here's what makes this story different. She did not win because she was rich or powerful or connected. She won because she refused to disappear. And the way she did it will leave you speechless. Stay until the very end, because the final 5 minutes of this story will hit you harder than anything you have heard this year. Value statement. This is more than a divorce story. This is a reminder that your silence is not weakness, your patience is not surrender, and the people who underestimate you are handing you the greatest advantage you will ever have. If you know someone who needs to hear this story today, share it with them right now. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you have done in her place? And if you want more stories like this every single week, hit subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you never miss one. I will see you in the next video. Superior Court, Austin, Texas. Friday, 4:12 in the afternoon. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like trapped insects. Judge Harold Henderson adjusted his glasses and shuffled the papers on his bench for what he hoped would be the last time. This divorce had dragged on for 5 months, and frankly, he was tired. His wife had made pot roast. It was getting cold. Hayden Perry sat at the plaintiff's table in a navy suit that cost more than most people's cars. Gold watch, perfect posture, the kind of calm that comes not from inner peace, but from knowing you have already won. His attorney, Arthur Dent, a man known in Texas legal circles simply as the Shark, was checking his phone beneath the table. He was mentally on the golf course already. Tea time was at 6. On the other side of the courtroom, separated by 12 feet of polished wood and 12 years of broken promises, sat Lydia Perry. She wore a simple blue dress from Target. Her hands were folded over her pregnant belly. 8 months along, the baby was restless today, turning and kicking, as if she could sense the tension in the room. Lydia's attorney was a young woman named Sarah Jenkins, 29 years old. She had passed the bar 2 years ago and worked from a 1-bedroom apartment where her 4-year-old daughter colored at the kitchen table while Sarah reviewed case files. Sarah had taken this case for free because no one else would touch it. Her hands were shaking as she shuffled papers, and she was doing her best to hide it. Judge Henderson cleared his throat. Mr. Dent, your client is offering Mrs. Perry $50,000 as a final settlement for a 12-year marriage. Is that correct? Arthur Dent stood with the easy confidence of a man who had never lost a case he cared about winning. That is correct, Your Honor, and I would note that it is a generous offer. Mrs. Perry was a part-time librarian. She contributed nothing of material value to Perry Systems. Mr. Perry built that company from the ground up, with his own intellect and his own sweat. $50,000, given the circumstances, reflects considerable goodwill. Hayden leaned back in his chair. He caught Lydia's eye across the courtroom and mouthed one word: done. Judge Henderson nodded slowly. He reached for his stamp. The ink pad was ready. The paperwork was in order. In 30 seconds, this would all be over. Lydia Perry would walk out of this courtroom with $50,000, no home, no job, and a baby on the way. Hayden Perry would walk out with a $4.7 billion company and the freedom to do whatever he wanted with whoever he wanted, And then a sound interrupted the silence. Small, almost insignificant, the sound of a zipper opening, a tote bag being unclasped. Every head in the courtroom turned. Lydia Perry stood up slowly, one hand bracing the edge of the table, the other resting on her belly for just a moment before reaching into the bag at her feet. She pulled out a manila envelope. It was old. The corners were soft with age, the paper slightly yellowed. She held it the way you hold something precious and dangerous at the same time. She walked forward, each step measured and deliberate, and placed the envelope on the judge's bench. "Your Honor," she said, and her voice was steady, "before you sign that, I think you should see this." The courtroom went silent. Arthur Dent stopped checking his phone. Hayden Perry's carefully constructed calm flickered, just for a moment, like a candle in a draft. Judge Henderson looked at the envelope. He looked at Lydia. He looked at the pregnant belly and the target dress and the steady hands of a woman who had clearly been through something that $50,000 could never cover. He picked up the envelope, but to understand what was inside it and why it was about to cost Hayden Perry everything he had built, we need to go back. Back to the beginning. Back to the cage, 8 months earlier. Lydia Perry was 6 weeks pregnant, and the first emotion she felt was not joy. It was fear. She sat on the bathroom floor of a $12 million mansion in Westlake Hills, Austin, Texas, holding the pregnancy test with both hands, staring at those 2 pink lines, like they were a sentence she could not yet read. The marble was cold against her legs. The towels were Egyptian cotton, 700 thread count, perfectly folded on warming racks. The soap dispensers were imported from a boutique in Paris. Everything in this bathroom cost more than the car she had driven in college. And Lydia was terrified, not of motherhood. She had wanted a baby for years. She had dreamed about it in the quiet hours when Hayden was asleep and she could think her own thoughts without interruption. She had imagined tiny fingers and first words and reading bedtime stories in a rocking chair. Number Lydia was afraid of what Hayden would do with this information. Because in the 12 years since she had married Hayden Perry, she had learned one fundamental truth about the man she shared a bed with. Hayden did not experience life. He managed it. Every piece of information was a tool or a weapon. Every relationship was an asset or a liability. Every situation was something to be controlled, optimized, and directed toward his advantage. And a baby in Hayden's hands would become leverage. She knew this the way you know the weather is about to turn, not because someone told you, because you can feel the pressure change in your bones. Lydia stood up, wrapped the pregnancy test in toilet paper, and buried it at the bottom of the bathroom trash can, beneath cotton balls and dental floss. She washed her hands twice. She checked her face in the mirror. She practiced smiling. Then she went downstairs to start Hayden's breakfast. 2 eggs over medium, wheat toast, black coffee, the Wall Street Journal, folded to the markets section. Every morning, for 12 years. The mansion was enormous and mostly silent. 5 bedrooms, none of which felt like hers. A gourmet kitchen where a personal nutritionist planned every meal. A home gym, a wine cellar, a 3-car garage with a Porsche, a Range Rover, and a vintage Mercedes that Hayden never drove but liked to own. The living room had a view of the Texas Hill country that real estate magazines called breathtaking. Lydia called it a fishbowl, all glass. Everyone could see in, but she could not get out. The finances told the real story. Hayden controlled everything, every dollar, every account. Lydia received $200 a week on a prepaid Visa card that Hayden called her household allowance. She did not have a credit card in her own name. The car she drove was registered to Hayden. The house was in the company's name. Her cell phone was on Hayden's account, which meant he could see every call she made, every text she sent, every website she visited. She worked part-time at the Austin Public Library. 3 days a week, shelving books, running the children's reading hour, helping elderly patrons navigate the computer catalog. It was the one thing Hayden allowed because, as he put it keeps you busy, and it is not like anyone is going to poach a librarian. He said it as a joke. People laughed when he told it at dinner parties. Lydia loved the library, the quiet, the order, the smell of old paper and binding glue. It was the only place in her life where she felt like herself. Between the shelves, she was not Hayden Perry's wife. She was not the woman in the $12 million house with a $200 allowance. She was just Lydia, a person who loved books and knew the Dewey Decimal System by heart and could recommend the perfect novel for any mood. That evening, Hayden told her the Hendersons were coming for dinner. 4 couples total, 8 people. Lydia spent 4 hours cooking. Herb-crusted rack of lamb, roasted root vegetables, a salad with pomegranate seeds, homemade dinner rolls. She set the table with the Waterford crystal and the good china. When the guests arrived, Hayden greeted them at the door. He shook hands. He poured drinks. He made people laugh with a story about a software conference in Tokyo. He was, as always, magnetic. The kind of man who made you feel like the most important person in the room while simultaneously making sure you knew he was the most important person in the room. He did not introduce Lydia. She stood in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel over her shoulder, waiting. Hayden glanced at her once and said, "My wife will bring the wine." Not Lydia, not even her name. My wife, like a job title, like an appliance. When one of the guests, a woman named Patricia Henderson, complimented the lamb, Hayden smiled and said, "We have a wonderful new caterer." 8 people laughed. Lydia stood in the kitchen doorway, the dish towel still on her shoulder, 8 voices laughing in the next room at a joke that erased 4 hours of her work. And she pressed her hand against her stomach where a tiny life was growing, a life that did not yet know what kind of house it was being born into. She whispered, so quietly that no one could hear, "I am going to tell him tomorrow." She did not tell him tomorrow. She did not tell him for 3 more weeks, because every time she opened her mouth to say the words, she looked at Hayden's face and saw the calculations already running behind his eyes, and she closed her mouth again. To understand Lydia's fear, you have to understand who Hayden used to be. Because the man sitting at that dinner table, taking credit for his wife's cooking, was not the same man she had married. Not even close. In 2009, Hayden Perry and Lydia Bennett lived in a 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of Austin. The rent was $850 a month. The kitchen faucet dripped. The air conditioning worked only when it felt like it, which in a Texas summer meant roughly never. Hayden was 25. Lydia was 23. He was trying to launch a cloud computing startup from their kitchen table, surrounded by empty coffee cups and crumpled napkin sketches and a whiteboard he had bought at a garage sale for $15. Lydia worked at the university library during the day, earning $11.75 an hour, and proofread Hayden's pitch decks at night. They ate ramen 3 nights a week, not the artisanal kind from a trendy restaurant, the kind that comes in a plastic package for 29 cents. But they were happy, or at least Lydia remembers it that way. Hayden would stay up until 2 in the morning working on code, and Lydia would sit beside him, reading or grading papers for the professor she was assisting, and sometimes he would reach over, without looking, and squeeze her hand, just a squeeze. No words. Just, "I am here, you are here, we are in this together." One evening, in June, Hayden hit a wall. The prototype for his cloud storage system kept crashing. The problem was data compression. His small team of 3 engineers had been working on it for weeks, and they could not figure out why the system collapsed under heavy data loads. The seed funding pitch was in 9 days. If the prototype did not work, the investors would walk. Hayden sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. It is over, Lyd. I cannot make it work. The compression algorithm is wrong, and I do not know how to fix it. Lydia put down her book. She walked over and looked at the code over his shoulder. She had studied applied mathematics at Ohio State before dropping out to follow Hayden to Austin. She never finished the degree, but she never lost the instinct. Numbers made sense to her the way words make sense to poets. She could feel when something was wrong in a formula, the way a musician can hear a note that is slightly flat. She looked at the code for 20 minutes. Then she said, "Can I try something?" Hayden was too exhausted to argue. He pushed his chair back and collapsed on the couch. Lydia sat down at the kitchen table. She pulled up the compression algorithm. She saw the problem almost immediately. It was not the algorithm itself. It was the way the data was being partitioned before compression. The system was trying to compress everything at once, like trying to shove an entire wardrobe into a single suitcase. What it needed was a smarter sorting system. Break the data into categories, compress each category with a tailored method, then reassemble. She worked for 6 hours. The apartment was silent except for the drip of the kitchen faucet and the click of the keyboard. At some point, Hayden fell asleep on the couch, one arm thrown over his face. At 4:37 in the morning, Lydia ran the test. The prototype loaded. It processed the data. It compressed without crashing. She ran it again and again. 3 successful runs. She sat back in the chair and exhaled. Her eyes were burning. Her back ached. She was 23 years old, sitting in a kitchen that smelled like burnt coffee and old ramen. And she had just written the algorithm that would eventually become the foundation of a $4.7 billion company. When Hayden woke up at 7 and saw the results on the screen, he stared for a full minute. Then he picked Lydia up off the chair and spun her around the kitchen so fast, her feet knocked a coffee cup off the counter. "Lydia, you are a genius. I swear whatever this becomes, it is ours. 50-50. Partners forever." He grabbed a yellow legal pad from the stack beside the refrigerator. Right there, standing in that tiny kitchen, with the dripping faucet and the crooked blinds, he wrote out an agreement in his own handwriting. Eli, Hayden James Perry, agree that Lydia Ann Bennett shall receive 30% of the founding shares of Perry Systems in recognition of her intellectual contribution to the company's core compression technology. This agreement is made freely and in good faith. He signed it. Lydia signed it. Their neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Elena Delgado, was a notary public. They knocked on her door at 7:15 in the morning, and she stamped it in her bathrobe, shaking her head and smiling. Then Hayden opened 2 beers. At 7:30 in the morning, he clinked his bottle against Lydia's and said, "This does not even matter, Lyd. What is mine is yours. Always." Lydia kept the legal pad paper. She folded it carefully and put it in a shoebox with other important things. Her father's watch, her college ID, a photo of her mother at 20. Years later, when they moved into the mansion, Lydia packed the shoebox and sent it to her mother's house in Ohio for safekeeping. She had not thought about it in years. Until the morning she sat on the bathroom floor, holding a pregnancy test, and remembered a boy in a kitchen who once called her a genius. That boy was gone now. The man downstairs, checking stock prices on 3 monitors while his wife's cooking grew cold in the oven, that was a different person entirely. The money had not changed Hayden Perry. It had revealed him, like water wearing away stone to show what was always underneath. Lydia told Hayden she was pregnant on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after she found out herself. She had rehearsed the moment in her head a dozen times. She imagined his face softening. She imagined him pulling her close, the way he used to, back when closeness was something they shared, instead of something she had to earn. She told him in the kitchen, after dinner, she had cleared the plates. He was scrolling through emails on his phone. "Hayden, I need to tell you something." He did not look up. "Can it wait? I have a board call in 20 minutes. I am pregnant." He looked up then. His face went through a series of expressions so quickly that Lydia could barely track them. Surprise, calculation, assessment, like a computer processing new data and determining how it affected the operating plan. "Well," he said, "that is something." He did not hug her. He did not touch her belly. He did not say congratulations, or I love you, or this is wonderful. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "Cancel the Aspen trip and get me Dr. Whitfield on the line. I want the best OB in the city, not the one she has been seeing, the best one." Lydia stood in the kitchen, the pregnancy announcement still hanging in the air like smoke, and watched her husband manage her body the way he managed a quarterly earnings report. Task identified, resources allocated, personnel assigned. Within a week, Hayden had hired a pregnancy consultant named Diane, a tall, brisk woman with a clipboard and a master's degree in nutrition who showed up 3 times a week to monitor Lydia's diet, exercise schedule, sleep patterns, and weight gain. Lydia's meals were now designed by a specialist. Her walks were timed. Her sleep was tracked by a device, Bussin on her wrist. She felt like a vessel being optimized for delivery, like an incubator with a name and a heartbeat, but no authority. The Perry Systems Gala was held in October at the Four Seasons in downtown Austin. Lydia was 8 weeks pregnant and exhausted to her bones. But attendance was not optional. Hayden required her at company events the way a set designer requires furniture. She was part of the staging. She wore a black dress that still fit, heels that made her feet ache, and a smile she had practiced in the mirror. 300 guests, open bar, a string quartet. Hayden worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, clapping shoulders, laughing at jokes that were not funny because the people telling them were rich enough to deserve laughter. Lydia stood near the bar, holding a glass of sparkling water, watching her husband. And then she noticed something. Hayden was talking to a woman she had not seen before, tall, confident, red dress that fit like it had been sewn directly onto her body. Dark hair pulled back, the kind of woman who walked into a room and rearranged the gravity. Hayden's hand was on the small of her back, not a casual brush. A placement. His fingers spread slightly, resting in the curve above her hip. It lasted 3 seconds, maybe 4. But Lydia counted every one. She turned to the wife of a board member standing beside her. "Who is the woman in red?" "Oh, that is Sasha Cole. She runs PR for the company. Very talented. Hayden hired her personally about 6 months ago." Lydia watched Sasha laugh at something Hayden said. She watched his face as he looked at Sasha, and she recognized that expression with a clarity that felt like a slap. It was the way he used to look at her, in the kitchen, in 2009, the wonder, the admiration, the look that said, "You are the most fascinating person I have ever met." He had not looked at Lydia that way in years. She did not confront him. She did not ask questions. She filed it away. She tucked it into the same locked room in her mind where she kept all the things she knew but was not ready to know. The financial control, the isolation, the way he corrected her in public, the way she flinched when she reached for the wrong fork at dinner. Women do this. They know. They know long before they admit it. They carry the knowledge around like a stone in their pocket. and they tell themselves it is not heavy enough to matter, until one day it is. Dr. Amara Rhodes had been practicing obstetrics for 23 years. She had delivered over 2,000 babies. She had seen every complication, every miracle, every heartbreak that a delivery room could offer. And she had learned to read pregnant women the way some people read weather patterns. Lydia's first appointment with Dr. Rhodes was in late October. Dr. Rhodes was warm, direct, and 50-ish, with reading glasses perpetually pushed up on her forehead, and a habit of speaking to patients as if they were friends she was genuinely worried about. She noticed immediately that Lydia was underweight for her stage of pregnancy. The numbers on the chart did not lie. Lydia was eating, but not enough, sleeping, but not well. Her blood pressure was elevated. Her hands trembled slightly when she sat in the exam chair. Dr. Rhodes asked careful questions in a voice designed to sound casual. "How are you feeling overall? Getting enough rest?" "I am fine, just a little tired." "And appetite?" "Sometimes in the first trimester things can be tricky. Hayden has a nutritionist. She plans all my meals." Dr. Rhodes noted the phrasing. "Hayden has a nutritionist. Not I have a nutritionist. Not we have a nutritionist." "And how are things at home? Is there anything making you anxious?" Lydia almost told her. The words were right there, sitting on the edge of her lips, like birds on a wire. The prepaid card, the cameras, the way Hayden said, "my wife," instead of her name, the woman in the red dress, with Hayden's hand on her back, the way her husband treated the pregnancy like a project management exercise instead of a miracle. But then she thought about the house, the money, the baby growing inside her, the fact that Hayden was the largest donor to 3 hospitals in Austin, including this one. The fact that Hayden knew everyone. The fact that if she said the wrong thing to the wrong person, it would get back to him. And then what? What would he do? She did not know. And that uncertainty was the most effective prison in the world. "Everything is fine," Lydia said. "I have just been tired." Dr. Rhodes wrote something in the chart. She looked at Lydia for a beat too long, not judgmental, not pitying, just knowing. The look of a woman who had seen this pattern before. The expensive clothes and the undernourished body. The perfect marriage and the trembling hands. "Lydia," she said gently, "I want you to know that anything you tell me in this room stays in this room. And if there is ever anything you need, anything at all, you can call me directly. Here is my personal cell number." She wrote it on a prescription pad and handed it to Lydia. Lydia took it. She put it in her purse. She did not call for weeks, but she kept it. She kept it the way a drowning person keeps their hand above water. Not because they think rescue is coming, but because giving up means going under. 4 months into the pregnancy, something changed in Lydia. It was not dramatic. There was no single moment of revelation, no lightning bolt, no speech in front of a mirror. It was more like a thaw. The slow warming of frozen ground when spring finally decides to arrive. The baby's first kicks had something to do with it. She felt them on a Wednesday afternoon, standing in the kitchen, staring at the refrigerator. The kicks were light, like tiny drum beats from the inside, a message tapped in a code only she could understand. And in that moment, she felt something she had not felt in years. Fury. Not the hot, explosive kind, not the kind that throws plates or slams doors. A cold fury, a quiet fury. The kind that settles into your bones and hardens there like cement. The kind that says, not just for me anymore, for her, for this baby, for the person I am going to bring into this world. She will not grow up in a cage. She will not learn that love means asking permission to exist. Lydia began paying closer attention. Not investigating, not yet. Just watching, the way a chess player studies the board before making a move. She noticed Hayden's patterns. When he left, where he said he was going versus where his car actually was. What he said versus what he did. The gaps between the two. She started Googling things late at night on her phone, carefully. In private browsing mode, she searched for Texas community property law. She searched for coercive control. She searched for financial abuse in marriage. Each search result was like a light turning on in a room she had been sitting in for 12 years. She had never had a word for what was happening to her. Now she had dozens. One evening, she made a mistake. She left her phone on the kitchen counter, open to a browser tab. The search was still visible on the screen. Texas Community Property Law Divorce. She realized it 10 minutes later and went back to the kitchen. The phone was where she had left it. The screen had gone dark. She grabbed it, cleared the history, and exhaled. But Hayden had cameras. Not hidden ones. He had told her about them years ago, framed as a security measure. 4 cameras in the main rooms, one at the front door, one at the back, one covering the driveway. He had said they were connected to a monitoring service, and Lydia had never questioned it because she had no reason to. Who installs cameras in their own home to spy on their wife? That was something that happened in movies, not in a $12 million house in Westlake Hills. But Hayden checked the feeds every night, on his laptop, in his home office, behind a closed door. He reviewed the footage the way a warden reviews security tapes, not because he expected trouble, because control requires constant vigilance. The moment you stop watching is the moment you lose power. He saw the phone. He saw the screen. He could not read the text clearly, but the words divorce and property law were large enough. He did not yell. He did not confront Lydia. Hayden Perry was not a man who yelled. Yelling was crude, imprecise, the tool of men who lacked better options. Hayden engineered. He designed outcomes, the way he designed software. Identify the problem, determine the most efficient solution, execute without emotion. The following Monday, Lydia arrived at the Austin Public Library for her shift. She walked in through the staff entrance the way she had 3 days a week for 5 years. She hung up her coat. She put her lunch in the break room refrigerator. She walked to the circulation desk. Her manager, Paul, was standing there. He would not meet her eyes. "Lydia, can I talk to you in my office for a minute?" She followed him. She already knew, not the details, but the shape of it. She could feel it the way you feel a storm approaching before you see the clouds. "Lydia, I am so sorry. Your position has been eliminated. Budget restructuring. The board made the decision last week." "The board," Lydia repeated. "I fought it. I want you to know that. You are one of the best employees we have ever had. The kids love you. But the funding situation..." He trailed off. He could not say it, but Lydia could. Hayden Perry was the library's largest private donor. He had donated $150,000 for a new children's wing last year. His name was engraved on a brass plaque by the front door. Perry Reading Room, donated by Hayden and Lydia Perry. He had included her name on the plaque. How generous. You do not fire the wife of your biggest donor unless the biggest donor tells you to. Lydia drove home in the SUV that was not hers, on a road in a neighborhood where every house cost millions, and every lawn was perfect, and every family looked happy from the outside. She pulled into the driveway. She sat in the car for 3 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the house that was not her house, in the life that was not her life. Then she walked through the front door. Hayden was in the living room. The Wall Street Journal was open on his lap. He looked up with an expression of practiced concern. "I heard about the library. That is a shame." Lydia stood in the doorway. She said nothing. "But honestly, Lyd, with the baby coming, you should be home. I have been saying that for weeks. The nutritionist agrees. The consultant agrees. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise." He smiled, the kind of smile that a man gives when he has just moved a chess piece and is waiting for you to realize you are in check. Lydia wanted to scream. She wanted to pick up the brass lamp from the side table and throw it through the floor-to-ceiling window. She wanted to say, "You called them. You made them fire me. You took the only thing I had that was mine, the only place I could breathe, and you burned it down because I Googled the word divorce." Instead, she said, "Maybe you are right." 4 words, each one a stone she swallowed. She walked upstairs. She closed the bedroom door. She went into the bathroom, sat on the cold marble floor, leaned against the bathtub, and cried without making a sound. Because in this house, even the walls listened, and as she cried, the baby kicked. Hard, right at that moment, in the worst moment. As if the baby was saying, "I am here. I feel it too. And I am not giving up, so you cannot either." That night, Lydia could not sleep. At 2 in the morning, she gave up trying. She went downstairs in bare feet, the house dark and enormous around her, every shadow familiar and hostile. She opened the refrigerator and stood there, bathed in cold light, staring at the contents. Every shelf was organized like a laboratory, pre-portioned containers with printed labels. Lydia, Tuesday, lunch. Lydia, Wednesday, snack. Lydia, Thursday, dinner. Each one designed by the nutritionist, approved by the consultant, calibrated to the precise caloric and nutritional needs of a woman in her second trimester. She had not chosen what to eat for herself in years. Not really. Not freely. Every meal was a decision made by someone else. For her own good, they said, as if a grown woman could not be trusted to feed herself. She closed the refrigerator. She opened the freezer. And there, shoved in the back behind bags of organic vegetables and frozen acai packs, she found a pint of ice cream. Cherry Garcia. The housekeeper must have left it. Or maybe it was an older purchase that had been forgotten. It did not matter. Lydia sat on the kitchen floor, pregnant, barefoot, 2 in the morning, eating ice cream straight from the container with a spoon she grabbed from the drawer. In a $12 million house with a professionally designed meal plan and a nutritionist on retainer. And it was the most free she had felt in years. She sat there for 20 minutes, eating slowly, feeling the cold sweetness on her tongue, feeling the baby shift inside her, feeling the marble tile cool against her legs, and something crystallized. Not a plan, not yet, but a decision, a line drawn in the darkness where no one could see it. I am going to get out. I do not know how, I do not know when, but I am going to get out of this house, and I am going to take my daughter with me, and Hayden Perry is not going to stop me. Because I wrote the code that built his empire. I wrote the algorithm that made him a billionaire. And if he thinks I am too stupid to find my way out of a cage, then he has forgotten who solved his hardest problem while he slept on the couch. She put the ice cream back in the freezer. She rinsed the spoon. She went back to bed. In the morning, she made Hayden his eggs, 2 over medium, wheat toast, black coffee, Wall Street Journal. He did not notice anything different about her. He never did. 2 weeks after the library, on a Thursday afternoon, Lydia was grocery shopping at Whole Foods. It was one of the few errands she was still allowed to do alone, probably because Hayden considered grocery shopping beneath his attention. Even a warden gives prisoners yard time. She was loading bags into the back of the SUV when she saw it. Hayden's car, the Porsche Taycan, dark gray with the custom license plate, PRYSYS. It was parked 3 rows away, near the entrance to a restaurant called Luca, an upscale Italian place where the pasta was handmade and a table required a 2-week reservation. But Hayden had told her he was in San Francisco today, a meeting with a venture capital firm about a potential acquisition. He had left that morning at 6. She had made his coffee. He had kissed her forehead, the way you tap a button on a machine you use every day, and said, "I will be back Sunday." San Francisco was 1,700 miles away. The Porsche was 17 feet away. Lydia did not walk toward the car. She did not peer through the restaurant windows. She did not need to investigate, because through the windshield of the Porsche, she could see two things on the passenger seat: a red scarf, not hers, and a tube of lipstick in a shade that Lydia had never worn: dark wine, bold. The kind of color that belongs to a woman who does not ask permission. Sasha Cole's color. Lydia stood in the parking lot. The Texas sun was hammering down, 92 degrees at 3 in the afternoon, the kind of heat that makes the asphalt shimmer and your thoughts go blurry. Sweat gathered at the back of her neck. Her hand moved to her belly. The baby kicked. Hard. 2 sharp kicks, like a door being knocked on from the inside, and something shifted inside Lydia, too. Not anger, not sadness, something colder and clearer, a feeling she would later describe as waking up in a room she had been sleepwalking through for 12 years. The furniture was the same, the walls were the same, but suddenly she could see the locks on the doors, the bars on the windows, the chains she had mistaken for jewelry. She stood in that parking lot for a full minute, sweat on her neck, baby kicking, the Porsche gleaming 3 rows away, and she made a decision that would change everything. She pulled out her phone. She dialed a number she had not called in 3 years. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady when the line connected. A groggy voice answered. "Hello? Mama, it is me." Silence on the other end. 1 second, 2, then a sound that was unmistakable. A mother trying not to cry. "Baby girl, I have been waiting for this call for 3 years." Ruth Bennett was 61 years old. She had been a registered nurse in Columbus, Ohio, for 34 years before she retired. She was practical the way a hammer is practical. Direct, blunt. The kind of woman who told you the truth, whether you wanted it or not, because she had spent 3 decades in emergency rooms where lying to patients cost lives. Lydia had not spoken to her mother in 3 years, not because she did not love her, not because they had fought, not really, because Hayden had engineered the separation with the same precision he applied to everything else. It started at Thanksgiving, 2019. Ruth had come to Austin for the holiday. During dinner, Hayden was telling a story about a deal he had closed, and he interrupted Lydia 3 times in 5 minutes. Each time, Lydia stopped mid-sentence and waited. Each time, Hayden continued talking as if she had not been speaking. Ruth watched this happen twice. The 3rd time, she set down her fork and said, "Hayden, your wife was talking." The table went quiet. Hayden smiled. The smile did not reach his eyes. After Ruth left, Hayden sat Lydia down in the living room. His voice was calm, reasonable, concerned. "Your mother does not respect our marriage, Lydia. She is trying to undermine me. She is trying to control you. I think it would be healthy for us, for our relationship, if you created some distance." The irony was so thick, you could choke on it. The man who controlled his wife's finances, monitored her phone, managed her meals, and installed cameras in his own home was accusing a retired nurse from Ohio of being controlling. But Lydia, who had spent years inside Hayden's reality, could not see the irony. When you live inside a distortion long enough, it becomes your normal. She stopped calling Ruth. She stopped visiting. She told herself it was her decision. She told herself Hayden was right, that her mother was difficult, that the distance was healthy. It was not her decision. And 3 years of silence had been the price. Now, standing in a parking lot outside a Whole Foods, 4.5 months pregnant, staring at her husband's car that was supposed to be in San Francisco, Lydia heard her mother's voice and felt the last 3 years crack open like ice on a river. "Mama, I need help." Ruth did not ask what kind of help. She did not ask why. She did not say, "I told you so," even though she had every right, even though she had spent 3 years lying awake at night worrying about a daughter who would not answer her calls. She said 5 words. "Tell me what you need. I need to leave him, but I am pregnant, and I have no money, and he controls everything." Then we start with what you do have. You have your brain, you have that baby, and you have me. I am getting on a plane. Ruth bought a ticket that afternoon. $412 on a credit card she would worry about later. She landed in Austin at 9:40 that evening. She did not go to the mansion. That would have triggered the cameras, and Hayden would have known within minutes. Instead, she checked into a budget motel off Interstate 35, the kind with thin walls and a parking lot that smelled like diesel and a continental breakfast that consisted of stale muffins and a coffee machine that made sounds like a dying animal. They met the next morning at a diner called Rosie's on South Lamar, the kind of place with vinyl booths and laminated menus and a waitress named Faye, who called everyone honey and refilled your coffee before you asked. Lydia walked in and saw her mother sitting in a corner booth, and for a moment she could not move. 3 years. 3 years of silence, of phone calls that went to voicemail, of birthdays missed, and holidays spent alone. 3 years of believing a lie that her husband had told so convincingly that she had accepted it as truth. Ruth stood up. She took one look at her daughter, thin, tired, pregnant, wearing a dress that cost $300 but looked like armor, stiff and uncomfortable, chosen not for beauty but for camouflage. And Ruth's face crumbled, not for long. 2 seconds, maybe 3, just long enough for the grief and the anger and the relief to flash across her features like lightning. Then she set her jaw. Ruth Bennett did not crumble. Ruth Bennett had held dying patients and delivered bad news and worked double shifts on Christmas Eve. Ruth Bennett was built for hard things. Sit down, baby girl. We have work to do. Sarah Jenkins was the daughter of Ruth's old friend from Columbus, 29 years old, single mother to a 4-year-old daughter named Ellie. She had passed the Texas bar 2 years ago after studying at night while working full-time and raising a toddler alone. She worked from her apartment because she could not afford office space. Her case files sat in stacked milk crates. Beside the kitchen table, where Ellie drew pictures of horses and butterflies. Sarah had never fought a billionaire. She had never gone up against an attorney like Arthur Dent. But she had handled 12 domestic violence cases in 2 years, and she knew Texas family law the way a mechanic knows an engine, from the inside out. Ruth arranged a meeting. The 3 of them sat in a booth at Rosie's diner. Faye, the waitress, brought them coffee and pie and pretended not to notice that the pregnant woman was crying. Sarah listened for 45 minutes without interrupting. She took notes in a yellow legal pad. When Lydia finished, Sarah set down her pen and looked at her with the kind of directness that comes from having survived hard things yourself. Lydia, I need to be honest with you. I have never gone up against an attorney like Arthur Dent. His firm has 15 lawyers. I have me and a printer that jams every other day. They are going to try to bury us in paperwork. They are going to try to outspend us, outlast us, and outmaneuver us. She paused. But here's what I know. Texas is a community property state. That means everything earned during your 12-year marriage belongs equally to both of you. Every dollar, every stock option, every piece of real estate. He cannot just hand you $50,000 and walk away. That is not how the law works. Lydia nodded. Then she told Sarah about the agreement, the legal pad, the kitchen, 2009. Sarah's pen stopped moving. She looked up. You are telling me that Hayden Perry signed a document giving you 30% of the founding shares of Perry Systems before the company was worth anything? It was just a piece of paper. He wrote it on a legal pad, but our neighbor notarized it. Where is it now? In a shoebox at my mother's house in Columbus. Sarah looked at Ruth. Ruth was already pulling out her phone. I will call FedEx right now. Overnight delivery. I will have it here by tomorrow afternoon. Sarah sat back in the booth. She stared at the ceiling for a moment, processing the information, running the legal calculations. Then she looked at Lydia. If that document is what you say it is, notarized and signed voluntarily by both parties, it could be enforceable under Texas Family Code Section 4105. It would qualify as a post-nuptial agreement, and 30% of the founding shares of a company valued at $4.7 billion. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. The number hung in the air between them, like something too large to hold. We need to be careful, Sarah said. Hayden has resources. He has surveillance. He has a narrative that he has been building for years. The narrative that you are dependent, that you contributed nothing. We need to build our own narrative, and we need evidence. I have been keeping a diary, Lydia said quietly. Dates, times, everything he has done. I have been writing it down every night after he takes his sleeping pill. Sarah and Ruth exchanged a look. It was the look of two women who had just realized that the quiet one in the room had been paying attention all along. The next 3 weeks were the most carefully choreographed of Lydia's life. She could not make a mistake. One wrong step, one suspicious behavior, caught on Hayden's cameras, and the fragile escape she was building would collapse. She kept her routine perfect. Breakfast at 7. Nutritionist meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Prenatal yoga on Wednesdays. The class Hayden had selected for her at a studio where the other women were all wives of executives who talked about kitchen renovations and nanny interviews. She smiled. She nodded. She asked about countertop materials. She was so normal, it was camouflage. And every night, after Hayden took his Ambien and fell asleep, she wrote. The diary was a small notebook, the kind you could buy at a drugstore for $3. Nothing fancy. No leather cover or embossed initials, just lined pages and a cheap pen. Lydia kept it taped to the underside of a bathroom drawer, behind the hairdryer, where no one would think to look. She wrote everything. Dates, times, exact quotes, every instance of financial control, every act of isolation, every manipulation, large and small. She wrote about the library, about the cameras, about the nutritionist and the consultant and the pregnancy being managed like a corporate project. She wrote about Sasha Cole's red scarf on the passenger seat of the Porsche. She wrote about the dinner party where Hayden called her cooking a caterer's work. She wrote about the prepaid Visa card with $200 a week. 12 years of marriage documented in a $3 notebook. 12 years of a woman paying attention while the man beside her assumed she was not. The bank records came next. Hayden's laptop sat on the kitchen counter every morning while he ate breakfast. He had never bothered to set a password on it, not because he was careless, but because he genuinely did not believe Lydia would know what to do with the information. She was a librarian. What would a librarian know about offshore accounts and shell companies and wire transfers? What he did not know was that Lydia had studied applied mathematics. What he did not know was that she could read a spreadsheet the way she could read a novel. Fast, thoroughly, and with an understanding of what the numbers were trying to hide. One morning, while Hayden was in the shower, and the cameras in the kitchen showed nothing unusual because Lydia had positioned herself with her back to the lens, she opened the laptop and photographed the screen with her phone. 3 photographs. Quick, Efficient, close. Swipe, click. What she found made her hands go cold. Wire transfers totaling $11.3 million to accounts she had never heard of. Accounts in the Cayman Islands with company names that meant nothing. Shell corporations with no employees and no offices and no purpose except to hide money from a wife who was not supposed to be looking. And one transfer that was not hidden at all. A property in Austin, a penthouse downtown valued at $4.2 million, transferred 6 months ago into the name of Sasha Cole. Sasha was not just the woman in the red dress at the gala. She was not just the lipstick on the passenger seat. She was a co-conspirator. She was the woman Hayden was building his next life with, using money that belonged to his current marriage. In Texas, transferring marital assets to a third party during a marriage is called dissipation. It is a serious violation of community property law. It is the kind of thing that makes judges very unhappy. Lydia saved the photographs in a hidden folder on her phone, then deleted them from the camera. Gets her roll. She closed the laptop. She made Hayden's eggs. The agreement arrived 3 days later. Ruth had sent it via FedEx to a post office box that Lydia had opened using cash from selling her grandmother's pearl ring at a pawn shop on East Riverside Drive. The ring had been Lydia's most precious personal possession, the only piece of jewelry that Hayden had not bought her, the only thing in her life that connected her to a time before him. She got $400 for it. It was worth far more, but pawn shops are not in the business of fair prices, and Lydia was not in a position to negotiate. The post office box cost $39 for 3 months. She paid in cash. No credit card, no debit card, no trail. When she opened the FedEx envelope and pulled out the folded legal pad paper, she stood in the post office lobby and stared at it for a long time. The paper was yellowed with age. The handwriting was unmistakably Hayden's, the tall, confident letters of a 25-year-old man who believed the world was about to open up for him. Her own signature was below his, rounder, more careful, and at the bottom, the notary stamp of Mrs. Elena Delgado. State of Texas, dated June 14th, 2009. It was not elegant, it was not typed on letterhead or drafted by a law firm. It was 2 signatures on a legal pad, written in a kitchen that smelled like burnt coffee, witnessed by a neighbor in a bathrobe. But it was real. And it was notarized, and under Texas law, that made it enforceable. Ruth, practical as ever, took on the role of investigator. She could not afford to hire a professional, so she did it herself. She drove a rented sedan past Hayden's downtown penthouse, the one Lydia was not supposed to know about, and parked across the street at 7 in the evening. She waited. She was good at waiting. 34 years of night shifts in emergency rooms had taught her that patience was not passive. Patience was preparation. At 7:45, Sasha Cole walked through the lobby doors. She used a key, not a visitor's badge, not a buzzer, a key. She let herself in the way you let yourself into your own home. Hayden arrived 20 minutes later. He parked in the underground garage. Ruth could see him through the lobby glass, walking toward the elevator, loosening his tie. Ruth photographed everything. The timestamps on her phone confirmed the timeline. She texted Lydia a single image. No caption, no explanation. Lydia looked at the photograph for a long time. Sasha entering the lobby, the key in her hand, the penthouse that Hayden owned in secret, paid for with money that was half Lydia's. She put the phone down. She placed both hands on her belly. The baby was moving, restless, as if she could feel her mother's heartbeat quickening. "It is going to be okay, little one," Lydia whispered. "Mama knows now, and knowing is the first step." At 6 months pregnant, Lydia Perry sat in a doctor's office and realized she was 3 wrong answers away from losing her baby. It started with Hayden's cameras. They had caught something, not the laptop, not the photographs, but Lydia leaving the house at odd hours, meeting people Hayden did not recognize, coming home with an expression he could not decode. Hayden did not know what she was planning. He did not know about Sarah or Margaret or the agreement in the FedEx envelope, but he could sense something, a shift in the air, a change in the frequency of her obedience. She was still making his eggs in the morning, still attending the nutritionist meetings, still doing everything she was supposed to do, but there was something behind her eyes that had not been there before. A distance, a resolve, and Hayden Perry did not tolerate things he could not control. He called Dr. Whitfield, the obstetrician he had handpicked, not Dr. Rhodes, who was Lydia's choice. Dr. Whitfield, who knew where his referral fees came from and whose practice had received a generous donation from Perry Systems last year. Hayden's voice on the phone was calm, concerned, the voice of a worried husband. "Doctor, I am very concerned about Lydia. She has been showing signs of prenatal psychosis. She is paranoid. She believes I am having an affair. She has been leaving the house at night to meet people I do not know. She is erratic and emotionally unstable. I am worried about her safety and the safety of our child." Dr. Whitfield scheduled an emergency evaluation. Not with Dr. Whitfield himself, with a psychiatrist named Dr. Franklin, who specialized in perinatal mental health and who owed Dr. Whitfield several professional favors. Lydia arrived at the appointment thinking it was a routine checkup, her regular weekly visit. She walked into the office expecting the scale, the blood pressure cuff, the Doppler wand that let her hear the baby's heartbeat. Instead, she was led to a different room, a room with soft lighting and a leather couch, and a man she had never seen before sitting across from her with a clipboard. "Mrs. Perry, I am Dr. Franklin. Your husband and Dr. Whitfield asked me to have a conversation with you today. Just a chat. Nothing to worry about." Lydia sat down slowly, her pulse spiked, but she kept her face neutral. She had been keeping her face neutral for 12 years. She was an expert. Dr. Franklin asked questions. Each one was a landmine wrapped in cotton. "Mrs. Perry, do you sometimes feel that people are watching you?" They were watching her. There were cameras in every room of her house. Hayden checked the feeds every night. "Do you believe your husband is hiding things from you?" He was hiding things from her. $11.3 million in offshore accounts, a $4.2 million penthouse in his mistress's name. "Have you been leaving the house at unusual hours?" She had, to meet her lawyer. "Do you sometimes feel that people are working against you?" They were. Her husband had gotten her fired from the library. He had cut her off from her mother. He had hired a psychiatrist to evaluate her sanity. Every truthful answer sounded like paranoia. Every honest response was evidence of mental instability. This was by design. Hayden had engineered it perfectly. He had taken the facts of her life, the surveillance, the control, the isolation, and reframed them as delusions. The cameras became paranoid fantasies. The hidden money became suspicious thinking. The meetings with her lawyer became erratic behavior. It was brilliant. It was monstrous. It was the most dangerous thing Hayden had ever done. Because if Dr. Franklin concluded that Lydia was a risk to herself or the baby, he could recommend an involuntary psychiatric hold. And if that happened, Hayden would use it. He would take the evaluation to court. He would say, "She is unstable. She tried to leave. She is a danger to our child." And a judge, looking at a pregnant woman with a psychiatric evaluation and a billionaire husband with a team of lawyers, might believe him. Lydia sat in that leather chair, 6 months pregnant. her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat, and she understood with perfect clarity what was happening. She was being tested, not medically, strategically. This was not a doctor's appointment. It was a trap. She swallowed everything. Every truth, every scream, every urge to say, "He is lying to you. I am not crazy. The cameras are real. The money is hidden. The mistress has a key to his penthouse. I have photographs. I have a diary. I have a notarized agreement that proves I built the foundation of his company." She forced her face into calm. She smiled at Dr. Franklin. She spoke in a voice so steady it could have leveled water. "No, doctor, I do not feel that people are watching me. I think the pregnancy has just made me a little anxious. My husband has been very supportive. I have been emotional, which I understand is normal. I am sorry to waste your time." Dr. Franklin studied her face. He wrote on his clipboard. He asked a few more questions, softer ones, follow-ups designed to catch inconsistencies. Lydia answered each one with the practiced ease of a woman who had been performing normalcy for 12 years. She passed. Barely. The evaluation concluded with Dr. Franklin's recommendation. No concerns at this time. Continue monitoring. Outside the office, in the parking lot, Lydia climbed into the passenger seat of Ruth's rented sedan. Ruth had been waiting for 2 hours, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles were white. Lydia closed the door, and then she began to shake. Full body tremors, starting in her hands and spreading through her arms, her shoulders, her chest. Her teeth chattered. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts. Ruth reached over and held her daughter's hand. "What happened in there? He tried to have me committed, Mama. He tried to have me locked up and take my baby." Ruth sat very still for a long time. The engine hummed. Outside, other patients walked in and out of the medical building, going about their ordinary lives, having no idea that in this rented sedan, a pregnant woman was shaking because her husband had tried to weaponize medicine against her. Finally, Ruth spoke. Her voice was low and hard and absolutely certain. "We are going to make him pay for that. Not with anger, with evidence." That same week, Lydia's last remaining friendship died. Claire Morrison and Lydia had been friends for 7 years. They used to meet for coffee every Thursday at a shop called Brew on South Congress. Claire was warm and funny and the kind of friend who texted you photos of dogs she saw on the street because she knew it would make you smile. They had stopped meeting a year ago, not because they had fought, but because Hayden had called Claire and told her, in his most concerned, most compassionate voice, that Lydia was going through something and needed space. He said it the way you might say it about someone recovering from surgery, with gravity, with implication. Claire, who liked Hayden and trusted Hayden and had no reason to doubt Hayden, respected the request. She stopped calling. She stopped texting. She gave Lydia space. Now, suddenly Claire called, "Lydia, I am worried about you. Hayden called me yesterday. He said you have been, well, unstable. He said you are making accusations. He said you think he is having an affair and hiding money. Honey, I have to be honest with you. That does not sound like the Hayden I know." Lydia gripped the phone. "Claire, listen to me. He is lying. He is having an affair. He is controlling my money. He tried to have me psychiatrically evaluated to take my baby." There was a pause on the other end, a long pause, the kind of pause that contains a verdict. "Lydia, listen to yourself. This is Hayden. He adores you. He built you that beautiful house. He takes care of everything. I think maybe the pregnancy is affecting your judgment. I think you need to talk to someone." A professional. "I am talking to a professional. I have a lawyer." "Lydia, please, please do not do something you will regret. Hayden is a good man. Maybe you just need rest. Maybe you need to step back and appreciate what you have. The words landed like blows, not because they were cruel, because they were sincere. Claire genuinely believed what she was saying. She genuinely believed that Hayden Perry was a good man and that Lydia was a pregnant woman losing her grip on reality. And that was Hayden's true genius. He did not just control Lydia. He controlled the story. He controlled what everyone around them believed. He was not abusing his wife. He was caring for a fragile woman. He was not hiding money. He was protecting assets from an emotionally compromised spouse. He was not having an affair. He was being accused by a paranoid woman who needed help. "Please do not call me about this again," Claire said. "I love you, but I cannot be part of this." The line went dead. Lydia stared at the phone. The silence after a dial tone is the loneliest sound in the world. She had just lost her last friend. Not to Hayden's money, not to threats or intimidation, to his story. The narrative he had built so carefully, so convincingly, that the people who loved Lydia believed the fiction more than the truth. The escape was planned for a Thursday. Hayden had a conference in San Jose. He would be gone for 3 days. The plan was simple. Lydia packs one bag. Ruth drives. They go to a domestic violence shelter that Sarah has arranged. The moment Lydia is safe, Sarah files the divorce papers. Hayden gets served in San Jose, 1,700 miles away from his wife and his cameras and his control. Lydia barely slept the night before. She lay in bed beside Hayden, listening to his breathing, the slow rhythm of a man sedated by Ambien, and the certainty of his own power. She looked at his face in the dark, the sharp jaw, the faint lines around his eyes. In sleep, he looked almost gentle, almost like the boy in the kitchen who had written an agreement on a legal pad and clinked a beer bottle against hers. But sleep is a costume that everyone wears, and underneath it, people are who they are. At 6 in the morning, Hayden's alarm went off. He dressed, he drank his coffee, he picked up his briefcase. At the door, he turned and said, "Do not forget, the nutritionist is coming at 10. And please do not eat anything off-plan. You know how Diane gets." He kissed her forehead, the machine button again. He left. Lydia waited until 8. She had learned patience from Ruth. Patience was not passive. Patience was preparation. She packed a small bag, not the designer luggage from the walk-in closet. A duffel bag from the back of the hallway closet. Canvas. Scuffed. The kind of bag that a college student would carry. She packed clothes, the diary, the photographs, the agreement wrapped in a plastic bag inside a Ziploc for extra protection. She packed one other thing. From the bedroom dresser, she took a framed photograph. Their wedding picture. Hayden and Lydia, 12 years ago, standing on the steps of a courthouse in Austin because they could not afford a church. He was wearing a rented suit. She was wearing a white dress from a consignment shop. They were both smiling. They looked like two people who believed that love and hard work were enough. She did not know why she packed it. Maybe because the woman in that photo deserved to be remembered. Maybe because leaving a marriage is not just about leaving the bad. It is about mourning the good that once was and is now gone. She walked to the front door. She opened it. Sunlight poured in. October sunlight, golden and warm and full of a promise that felt like freedom. Ruth's rented sedan was at the curb. Ruth was behind the wheel, engine running, hands steady. Lydia walked to the gate. The front gate of the property, iron bars, 8 feet tall, controlled by a keypad. She had used this gate every day for 7 years. She typed in the code. Access denied. She stared at the screen. She typed the code again, slowly, carefully, making sure each digit was correct. Access denied. Her phone buzzed. A text message from Hayden. "Going somewhere, Lyd? I changed the security codes before I left." The cameras are on. The gate company reports to me. Go back inside and tell your mother to leave my property before I call the police for trespassing. Lydia read the text 3 times. Each reading was a door slamming shut. He knew. He did not know everything, but he knew enough. He knew she was trying to leave. He knew Ruth was involved. He knew about the car at the curb. He had been watching the cameras from San Jose, the way a spider watches its web from the corner. She looked up from her phone. Ruth was standing on the other side of the gate, on the sidewalk, free, separated from her daughter by 8 feet of iron bars. Ruth pressed her hand against the metal. Lydia pressed hers on the other side. Their fingers aligned, the same shape, the same size, mother and daughter, separated by cold iron. "This is not over," Ruth said. Her voice cracked. It was the first time Lydia had heard her mother's voice crack since the day her father died. "Baby girl, this is not over. Not over." But that night, lying in the dark in the master bedroom of a house that was not hers, in a bed she had not chosen, hand on a belly that held a baby she was terrified of losing, Lydia stared at the ceiling and felt the full weight of her captivity settle onto her chest like a stone. The house was not a house. It was a prison with granite countertops and sub-zero appliances and $12 million worth of architectural details designed to make incarceration look like luxury. She pressed her hand against her belly. Grace kicked. One more breath, Lydia told herself. Just one more breath. The next 72 hours were the worst of Lydia's life. They came in waves, one disaster after another, each one worse than the last, each one designed to strip away another layer of hope. The first blow came on Monday. Hayden's attorneys filed for emergency custody of the unborn child. The filing was 23 pages long. It described Lydia as mentally unstable, a flight risk, and under the malign influence of family members seeking financial gain. It requested the court appoint Hayden Perry as temporary sole guardian upon birth. Lydia read the filing at the safe house. She had finally gotten out, climbing the back fence of the mansion at 2 a.m. while the cameras cycled through their rotation. Ruth had timed them. 12 seconds between the backyard camera's sweep and the side gate camera's activation. 12 seconds. Lydia, 7 months pregnant, climbed a 6-foot fence in 12 seconds. She would feel the bruises for a week. But now she sat on a folding cot in a domestic violence shelter, reading a legal document that described her mother, the woman who had held her as an infant, who had driven 1,200 miles without stopping, who had slept in a motel off Interstate 35, as a predator seeking financial gain. The second blow came on Tuesday. Sasha Cole posted a photograph on social media. It showed a beautifully decorated nursery, gray walls, white crib, a mobile with tiny elephants. The caption read, "Helping someone special get ready for a new chapter." The nursery was in Hayden's penthouse, the one Lydia was not supposed to know about. Hayden was not just replacing her. He was building a new family with another woman, using the baby that was still inside Lydia's body as the centerpiece. Lydia stared at the screen. She could not breathe. She could not think. The baby kicked, hard, and it felt like the baby was fighting too, fighting to stay in a world that was already trying to claim her before she was born. The third blow came on Wednesday. Arthur Dent filed a formal complaint against Sarah Jenkins with the Texas Bar Association. The complaint alleged that Sarah had solicited a vulnerable and mentally compromised client and was pursuing a frivolous and vexatious case designed to extort a settlement from a legitimate businessman. Sarah's license was placed under review. Her ability to practice law, the only tool Lydia had, could be taken away. Sarah called from her apartment, Her voice was quiet. In the background, her daughter, Ellie, was singing a song about a rainbow. "Lydia, they are coming for my license. If I lose it, I cannot help you. I cannot help anyone." Her voice cracked. "And I have a daughter. I have Ellie. I am so sorry." The line went silent except for Ellie's singing. That night, Lydia sat on the cot in the safe house. 7 months pregnant. No lawyer. Her husband suing for custody of her unborn child. No money. No job. Her best friend thought she was insane. The internet did not know she existed, and when it eventually found out, it would call her a gold digger. Ruth sat beside her. The shelter was quiet. The walls were thin. In the next room, a woman was humming to her children, trying to make an unfamiliar place feel like home. Neither Lydia nor Ruth spoke for a long time. They just sat side by side. The way they had sat, in hospital waiting rooms, and on front porches, and at kitchen tables throughout Lydia's life. Mother and daughter, 2 women at the bottom of a well, looking up. Then Ruth said something that Lydia would remember for the rest of her life. "When I was a nurse in the ER, I saw people die. Young people, old people, people who should have lived and people who were ready to go. And I saw people come back, people who had no vital signs, no heartbeat, no breath. And the ones who came back were not the strongest ones, Lydia. They were not the biggest or the toughest. They were the ones who refused to stop breathing, just one more breath. Then one more. Then one more. That is all I'm asking you right now. One more breath." Lydia breathed. The baby kicked. The woman in the next room hummed. One more breath. The turn did not come from Lydia. It came from William Sharp. And it came from a place of grief that had nothing to do with money. William Sharp was 67 years old. He had been on the Perry Systems Board of Directors for 9 years. He was a quiet man, the kind who sat at the end of the conference table and listened more than he talked. Hayden ignored him at meetings. Most of the board did. William was old guard, a formality, a name on a roster. But William had a secret that he carried with him every day, like a weight sewn into the lining of his jacket. 5 years ago, his daughter, Rebecca, died. Rebecca was 32. She was married to a man named Daniel, who controlled her finances, monitored her movements, isolated her from her family, and told everyone who would listen that Rebecca was fragile, emotional, difficult. Daniel was charming in public and cruel in private. The kind of cruelty that leaves no bruises, only silence. Rebecca called her father one night. Her voice was thin, stretched to the breaking point. "Daddy, I think I am going crazy." William tried to help. He offered money. He offered a room in his house. He begged Rebecca to leave, but Rebecca stayed. Because leaving is not as simple as walking out a door. Because the cage is not just physical. It is psychological, emotional, financial. It is the 1,000 small humiliations that teach you to doubt your own mind. It is the voice in your head that sounds like your husband's voice. The one that says, "Where would you go? Who would believe you? You are nothing without me." 3 months later, Rebecca was gone. William Sharp had watched Hayden Perry treat Lydia at company events for 9 years. He had seen the corrections, the condescension, the way Hayden introduced Lydia as my wife, instead of her name, as if she were an appendage rather than a person. He had watched Lydia flinch when she reached for the wrong fork. He had watched her ask permission before speaking. He recognized the pattern. He had seen it before, in his own daughter's marriage, in his own daughter's eyes. He did not save Rebecca. He would not make that mistake again. William contacted Ruth through a mutual acquaintance, a retired judge named Martin, who had served on a domestic violence advisory panel. The connection was discreet. William did not offer money. he offered something more valuable. A name, Margaret Lawson. Margaret was 58 years old. She was the founding partner of Lawson and Drake, one of the top family law and corporate litigation firms in Texas. She had handled divorces involving tech founders, oil barons, real estate moguls, and one sitting congressman. She was expensive. Her retainer alone was more than most people made in a year. William paid it, quietly, personally, from an account his own wife did not know about. Not because he was hiding it, but because some things are private, and the reasons behind them are between a man and the memory of his daughter. Margaret Lawson met Lydia at the safe house on a Wednesday afternoon. She arrived in a black town car, dressed in a gray suit, carrying a briefcase that had been to every major courthouse in Texas. She was not warm. She was not soft. She was precise, analytical, and absolutely relentless. She read the diary. She examined the photographs. She reviewed the bank records. She held the 2009 agreement up to the light and studied it the way a jeweler studies a diamond. Then she looked at Lydia. This agreement is enforceable under Texas Family Code, Section 4105. It was signed voluntarily. It was notarized. Both parties had capacity. Hayden will argue it was a joke, written on a legal pad during a moment of stress. But the notarization makes it a valid post-nuptial agreement. His signature is clear. Your signature is clear. The notary stamp is legitimate. She paused. Combined with community property claims and evidence of hidden assets, you have a real case, a strong case. But I want to be clear about what we are fighting for. 30% of founding shares is significant, but it is not about controlling the company. It is about leverage. It is about showing the court and the world that you were not a passenger in this marriage. You were a partner. You contributed. You have a legal and moral claim to what was built. What about the custody filing? Lydia asked. Margaret's jaw tightened. It was subtle, barely visible, but Lydia caught it. In that small movement, Lydia saw something she had not expected. Anger, not the cold, strategic kind, the personal kind, the kind that comes from caring. That, Margaret said, is where we fight hardest. Because no court in Texas is going to take a baby from a competent mother based on the word of the man who locked her in his own house. The next 3 weeks were a blur of preparation. Lydia worked from the safe house, sitting on a folding cot with a borrowed laptop, pillows propped behind her aching back, organizing evidence into folders. She was nearly 8 months pregnant now. The baby was heavy and restless and constantly moving, as if she could feel the urgency in her mother's heartbeat. Margaret built the case like an architect builds a building. Foundation first, structure second, details last. She filed a countersuit. Lydia Perry was seeking divorce on grounds of cruelty, specifically coercive control, which Texas courts had increasingly recognized as a form of domestic abuse. She was requesting full community property division, enforcement of the 2009 agreement, and contesting Hayden's custody filing with evidence of his abusive behavior. The evidence package was devastating. The original notarized agreement from 2009, bank records showing $11.3 million moved to offshore accounts during the marriage, property records showing the $4.2 million penthouse transferred to Sasha Cole's name, Lydia's diary documenting 12 years of financial control, isolation, and manipulation, a written statement from Dr. Amara Rhodes, who had volunteered to testify after learning about the psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Rhodes's words were precise and furious. That evaluation was not medicine. It was weaponization. Photographs of Sasha entering the penthouse with a key, phone records proving Hayden had accessed Lydia's location, call history, and text messages. Ruth's video of Lydia standing at the locked gate of her own home, pregnant, trapped, pressing her hand against iron bars. Margaret's investigators also uncovered something about Sasha Cole that changed the shape of the case. Text messages between Sasha and a friend, recovered from a cloud backup that Sasha had forgotten about. The messages were casual, chatty, the kind of conversation between two women who think no one will ever read what they are writing. The wife is pregnant and pathetic. He is going to leave her after the baby. I just need to be patient. The penthouse is already in my name. Sasha was not an innocent bystander. She was not a woman who had simply fallen for a married man. She was strategic, calculating, aware that Hayden was hiding assets and participating in the concealment. She was, in legal terms, a co-conspirator in the dissipation of marital property. And the bar complaint against Sarah Jenkins? Margaret's firm handled it in 3 days. A single letter from Lawson and Drake to the Bar Association citing the legal merits of the case and the evidentiary record was enough. The complaint was dismissed. Sarah's license was safe. Sarah showed up at the safe house that evening with a bottle of sparkling cider and tears on her face. They dropped it, she said. I can still practice. She and Lydia sat on the cot together and drank cider out of paper cups and laughed for the first time in weeks. Ellie colored at the folding table nearby, drawing a picture of a house with a big yellow sun. At the shelter, during those weeks of preparation, Lydia met other women. She had expected them to be different from her. She had expected broken women, defeated women, women from circumstances nothing like her own. She had expected, with the unthinking arrogance that privilege sometimes breeds, that her situation was unique. It was not. There was a teacher named Maria, whose husband had cut up her credit cards and told her she was too stupid to manage money. There was a nurse named Tamara, whose husband had installed tracking software on her phone and interrogated her every night about where she had been. There was a grandmother named Dorothy, who had fled her husband at 62 after 40 years, because one morning she woke up and realized she had forgotten what her own opinions sounded like. They sat in a circle, on mismatched chairs, in a room with fluorescent lights and donated furniture, and they talked. Nobody told anyone to be strong. Nobody offered platitudes. They just listened. They just said, I know. I have been there. I understand. One evening, a woman named Donna knocked on Lydia's door. Donna was 55, with kind eyes and rough hands and a voice that sounded like someone who had spent a lifetime being gentle with difficult things. She had left her husband 3 months ago. I heard you are expecting. I made you something. She held out a baby blanket, yellow, hand-knitted. The stitches were uneven, the edges slightly crooked. It was clearly the work of someone who was still learning, someone who had picked up knitting needles in a shelter because they needed to do something with their hands. It is not perfect, Donna said apologetically. Lydia took the blanket. She held it against her belly. She felt the yarn, the softness, the slight lumps where the tension had been inconsistent, and she thought about all the perfectly designed things in her old life, the pre-portioned meals and the Egyptian cotton towels, and the $12 million house with every detail curated for appearance. None of it had been made with love. None of it had been made with kindness. It is made with kindness, Lydia said. That makes it perfect. The preliminary custody hearing came first. Margaret presented the coercive control evidence to a family court judge named Wilson. Dr. Rhodes testified. The diary entries were read aloud. The gate footage played on a screen in the courtroom. The judge ruled swiftly. Temporary custody remained with Lydia. Hayden's emergency filing was denied. In the hallway afterward, Sarah, whose bar complaint had been dismissed, hugged Lydia so hard the baby kicked in protest. "We did it," Sarah whispered. But Lydia saw Hayden at the end of the hall. He was standing with Arthur Dent, talking quietly. He did not look angry. He looked calm, focused, like a man making a new plan. Lydia knew that expression. She had seen it for 12 years. It was the expression that preceded his most dangerous moves. She was right. That evening, a headline appeared on a major technology news website. Perry Systems CEO's estranged wife claims ownership of core code. Experts call it laughable. The article was devastating. It framed Lydia as a gold digger exploiting a scribbled note to extort billions from a visionary entrepreneur. It quoted anonymous industry experts who called the 2009 agreement worthless. It mentioned her pregnancy repeatedly, implying she had gotten pregnant deliberately to strengthen her legal position. It described Hayden Perry as a self-made genius who had built a billion-dollar company from nothing, conveniently erasing the kitchen and the algorithm and the 6 hours Lydia had spent rewriting the compression code while Hayden slept on the couch. The comment section was a parade of cruelty. Classic gold digger, they always come out of the woodwork when there is money. She trapped him with a baby. Oldest trick in the book. A librarian wrote cloud computing code? Sure. This is why billionaires need better lawyers. Hayden had leaked the story, but he had not just leaked facts. He had shaped the narrative. He had made Lydia the villain before she could tell her own story. He had turned public opinion into a weapon, the way he turned everything into a weapon. Lydia read the comments on her phone in the shelter. Each one was a small wound. She was not a public person. She was a woman who liked quiet rooms and alphabetical order and reading to children on Tuesday afternoons. She had never had strangers hate her before. She had never been the subject of a headline. She had never been reduced to a caricature by people who did not know her name or her face or her story. She put the phone down. She looked at her belly. She spoke to her daughter. "Is this even worth it? Maybe I should just take whatever he gives me and disappear." Ruth took the phone. She turned it off. She put it in a drawer. She sat down beside her daughter on the cot. "Those people do not know you. They do not know what he did. They do not know about the cameras. They do not know about the gate. They do not know about the doctor he hired to lock you up. They do not know about the algorithm you wrote in the kitchen at 4 in the morning, while the man who takes credit for it slept on the couch." She paused. She took Lydia's hand. "You are not fighting for money, Lydia. You are fighting so this little girl does not grow up thinking it is normal for a man to build a cage and call it love." Now we are back to the courtroom, Superior Court, Austin, Texas. Friday, 4:12 in the afternoon. Judge Harold Henderson, the same fluorescent lights, the same tired judge, the same 2 tables on opposite sides of the room. But everything else has changed. Margaret Lawson stands at the respondents' table, not Sarah. Sarah sits behind them as support, her hands no longer shaking. Margaret's presence changes the atmosphere of the courtroom the way a chess grandmaster changes the atmosphere of a tournament. Arthur Dent recognizes her immediately. His smirk, the one he has been wearing for 5 months, falters. In the back row, Sasha Cole sits in designer sunglasses, legs crossed, looking at her phone. She is sitting like a woman who expects to be celebrating tonight. Hayden Perry sits at the plaintiff's table. Navy suit, gold watch. But there is something different about him today. A tightness around his jaw, a stillness in his hands that is not calm but rigid. He is holding himself together the way a cracked window holds itself together, still intact, but one vibration from shattering. Judge Henderson speaks. Mr. Dent, your client is offering $50,000 as a final settlement. Mrs. Lawson, does your client wish to respond? Margaret stands, but she does not speak first. She turns to Lydia and nods. Lydia stands, slowly, one hand on the table, one hand on her belly. The courtroom is silent. Every person in the room is watching her, this pregnant woman in a simple blue dress, standing up in front of a billion-dollar legal machine. Your Honor, may I address the court? Briefly, Mrs. Perry. Lydia pauses. She looks at Hayden. She looks at the judge. She looks at the court reporter, whose fingers hover above the keys. She looks at the gallery, where Ruth is sitting in the second row, hands folded in her lap, eyes red, jaw set. Then Lydia speaks. My husband told this court that I contributed nothing to Perry Systems. He said I was a part-time librarian who managed the household. He said $50,000 was generous for 12 years of marriage. She places the manila envelope on the bench. The old envelope with the soft corners that she has been carrying like a shield. This is a post-nuptial agreement signed by Hayden Perry on June 14, 2009. It grants me 30% of the founding shares of Perry Systems in recognition of my intellectual contribution to the core compression algorithm that his company is built on. It is notarized by a licensed notary public in the state of Texas. Arthur Dent laughs. It is not a confident laugh. It is the laugh of a man trying to reclaim territory that is slipping away from him. Your Honor, this is theater. A scribbled note on a legal pad is not a binding contract. It is notarized, Margaret says, rising from her chair. Under Family Code Section 4105, a postnuptial agreement is enforceable if it is signed voluntarily by both parties and meets the basic requirements of a written agreement. This document meets every requirement. Judge Henderson opens the envelope. He unfolds the legal pad paper. He reads it slowly, carefully, the way judges read documents that might cost someone billions of dollars. His eyebrows rise. He looks at Hayden. Mr. Perry, is this your signature? Hayden's jaw tightens. The cracked window vibrates. He could lie. He could say it is a forgery. But forgery is a felony in Texas, and if the court orders a handwriting expert, and Margaret will demand one, the truth will be inescapable. Hayden signed that paper in his own handwriting. He signed it with the confident, expansive letters of a 25-year-old man who believed that promises were real and that love was permanent. That handwriting is his. There is no denying it. I may have signed something, Hayden says carefully. We were young. It was not serious. It was a joke. A joke with a notary stamp, Judge Henderson says. It is not a question. Hayden does not answer. Margaret does not wait for him to recover. She moves to the next phase with the efficiency of a surgeon. She presents the evidence, one piece at a time, each one a blow, to the narrative Hayden has spent 12 years building. Bank records showing $11.3 million moved to offshore accounts during the marriage. Hidden from Lydia, hidden from the court. A violation of community property law so flagrant that even Arthur Dent does not try to explain it. Property records showing the $4.2 million penthouse transferred to Sasha Cole. Dissipation of marital assets to a romantic partner. The kind of act that makes family court judges reach for their strongest penalties. Dr. Rhodes's written testimony about the psychiatric evaluation. The careful clinical language of a doctor who has seen medicine used as a weapon. The evaluation arranged by Mr. Perry was not a legitimate medical assessment. It was an attempt to manufacture a psychiatric diagnosis that could be used to remove a competent mother from her child. Phone records proving that Hayden accessed Lydia's location, call history, and text messages throughout the marriage. Every call logged, every text read, every movement tracked. And finally, the gate footage. Ruth's video, shot as on a phone, shaky and raw. A pregnant woman standing at the iron gate of her own home, pressing her hand against the bars, while her mother stands on the other side, separated by metal and money and the cruelty of a man who would rather cage his wife than let her go. When the footage plays, the courtroom goes silent. It is not dramatic. It is not cinematic. It is just a pregnant woman and her mother, separated by a fence, pressing their hands together through iron bars. It is ordinary in the worst possible way. It is the kind of ordinary that makes you realize these things happen in real houses, on real streets, to real women, every single day. Judge Henderson removes his glasses. He rubs his eyes. When he puts them back on, he looks at Hayden Perry, the way a man looks at something he has finally identified after years of suspicion. "Mr. Dent," the judge says slowly, "I strongly recommend you advise your client to reconsider his position." In the back row, Sasha Cole has done the math. The penthouse is in her name. That means she is part of the asset investigation. She could be deposed. Her text messages, the ones about the pathetic wife and the nursery and the patients, could be subpoenaed and read in open court. She is not a bystander anymore. She is exposed. Sasha stands. She does not look at Hayden. She picks up her purse. She walks to the courtroom door, heels clicking on the marble floor. She does not run. She does not hurry. She just walks, the way a person walks away from something they have decided is no longer profitable. Hayden turns to watch her go. His hand moves involuntarily, reaching out, the instinctive gesture of a man grasping at something falling off a cliff. She does not look back. The door closes behind her. Hayden turns back to the courtroom. And for the first time in 12 years of marriage, 5 months of divorce proceedings, and 1 afternoon of devastating revelations, Hayden Perry looks afraid. Margaret calls one final witness, Kevin O'Malley, the Chief Technology Officer of Perry Systems. He has been subpoenaed. He does not want to be here. His hands are trembling on the witness stand, and he keeps glancing at Hayden the way a subordinate glances at a boss who has the power to destroy him. Margaret's questions are precise. "Mr. O'Malley, in 2009, did Perry Systems face a critical technical challenge? Yes. Data compression. Our system could not handle the data load. We were going to lose our seed funding if we did not solve it within 2 weeks. And who solved the problem?" Kevin looks at Hayden. Hayden stares back. The stare is a message, clear as a billboard. Do not say it. Do not betray me. Remember who signs your stock options. Kevin swallows. He thinks about his career, his salary, his parking spot on the executive floor, his stock options that vest in 18 months. Then he thinks about something else. The emails from 2009 that he has kept on a personal hard drive for 16 years. The ones where Hayden wrote, in the unguarded excitement of a young entrepreneur who had not yet learned to rewrite history, "Lydia cracked it. She is smarter than all of us. Do not tell anyone. I do not want the investors to think I needed my wife to bail me out." Kevin O'Malley had a choice. Everyone in a courtroom has a choice. You can protect the powerful, or you can tell the truth. You cannot always do both. Lydia Perry solved the problem, Kevin says quietly. Hayden told us at the time he was proud of her. He used to call her his secret weapon. And when did he stop calling her that? Kevin is quiet for a moment. Then he says, "When the money came in." Arthur Dent objects. He argues that the algorithm was subsequently rewritten, making the 2009 agreement irrelevant. Margaret is ready. She produces Kevin's next testimony, backed by internal engineering document. The core compression kernel, the algorithm Lydia wrote in a kitchen at 4:30 in the morning, is still embedded in every version of Perry Systems software. It was never rewritten. It was built upon. Layer after layer of code added on top of it, like floors added to a building. But the foundation remained. Lydia's foundation. Hayden stands up. The cracked window shatters. This is insane. She is a librarian. She does not know anything about Mr. Perry. Judge Henderson's voice is sharp as a gavel. Sit down. Now. Hayden sits, but something in him is crumbling. Not just his legal case, his story. The story he has told himself for 12 years, the story that justified everything, the control, the isolation, the cameras, the locked gate. The story that said, I did this alone. She was baggage. She was lucky to be along for the ride. He looks at Lydia. She is not smirking. She is not triumphant. She is sitting in a blue dress from Target, one hand on her belly, looking tired and pregnant and human. She looks exactly like what she is, a woman who has been through something terrible and is almost through to the other side. And for one disorienting second, Hayden remembers the kitchen, the legal pad, the beer, the boy who spun a girl around the kitchen and said, partners forever. He blinks. He looks away. Judge Henderson took a recess. 48 hours. The longest 48 hours of Lydia's life. They reconvened on Monday. The courtroom looked the same but felt different. The fluorescent lights still buzzed. The benches still creaked. But there was a weight in the room, the gravity that settles over a space when everyone knows that what happens next will change lives permanently. Lydia was there. Ruth was in the gallery. Sarah was beside her. Margaret stood at the table. Hayden's seat was empty. Arthur Dent explained, in a voice stripped of its usual confidence, that Mr. Perry had accepted the terms and authorized his attorney to represent his interests. Hayden had signed the settlement from his lawyer's office. He could not face her. Judge Henderson looked at the empty chair for a long moment. Then he began. The ruling was delivered slowly, formally, each sentence a building block in a new reality. First, the 2009 post-nuptial agreement was valid and enforceable. Lydia Perry was granted 30% of Hayden Perry's founding shares in Perry Systems. Second, under Texas community property law, all assets acquired during the 12-year marriage were subject to equitable division. Given Hayden's deliberate concealment of assets, the offshore accounts, the penthouse transfer, the systematic hiding of marital property, the court awarded Lydia 60% of marital assets as a penalty for fraud on the community estate. Third, sole custody of the child was granted to Lydia. Hayden was granted supervised visitation rights, pending completion of a domestic violence intervention program. Fourth, Hayden was ordered to pay all of Lydia's legal fees, including Margaret Lawson's retainer. Fifth, the restraining order preventing Hayden from monitoring Lydia's communications was made permanent. The gavel fell. One sharp sound, final, absolute. Lydia did not cheer. She did not collapse. She exhaled, one long, shaking breath, like a woman who had been holding her breath for 12 years and was finally allowed to let it go. In the gallery, Ruth put her face in her hands and wept. Sarah squeezed Lydia's shoulder. Margaret leaned over and said quietly, "You did it." Lydia looked at Margaret, then at Sarah, then at Ruth in the gallery. She looked at the empty chair where Hayden should have been sitting. She looked at the judge, who was gathering his papers with the careful movements of a man who has done something important and knows it. "We did it," Lydia said. "We." 3 months later, Hayden Perry resigned as CEO of Perry Systems. The board of directors, led by William Sharp, voted no confidence after the full scope of the hidden assets became public. The Securities and Exchange Commission opened an investigation into the offshore transfers. The $4.2 million penthouse was clawed back into the marital estate. Hayden moved to a rental apartment in North Austin. No Porsche, no penthouse, no corner office, no Sasha, who left him the day the verdict came in and never looked back. He had his name and his reputation, both of which were considerably diminished. And he had the apartment, which was clean and adequate and absolutely silent in a way that the mansion had never been, because the mansion had always been full of Lydia. One evening, unpacking a box that had been in storage, he found an old photograph. 2008, the one-bedroom apartment. Lydia was asleep on the couch with a textbook on her chest. Her hair was messy. Her socks did not match. She looked like someone who had fallen asleep mid-thought, which she probably had. And Hayden, the Hayden in the photograph, was looking at her with an expression of pure wonder, the kind of wonder that money eventually killed. He put the photograph on the kitchen counter of his rental apartment. He sat on a folding chair and stared at it for a long time. He did not cry. Hayden Perry was not a man who cried, but he sat there, alone, in the quiet of an apartment that was nothing like the life he had built and lost, and he understood, for the first time, what he had actually thrown away. It was not the company, it was not the money, it was not the power, or the stock price, or the custom license plate. It was her. It was Lydia. It was the girl who solved his hardest problem while he slept on the couch. It was the woman who made his eggs every morning and raised his daughter and loved him for years after he stopped deserving it. That was what he lost. And no amount of money could buy it back. Sasha Cole was deposed in the asset investigation. Her text messages became public record, the ones about the pathetic wife and the patients and the penthouse. The internet, which had once believed Hayden's version of the story, read those messages and revised its opinion with the speed and ferocity that only the internet can muster. She lost her PR position. No major firm would hire a woman whose private messages had been read in open court. She moved to Dallas. She got a job at a small agency. No designer scarves. No penthouse keys. No billionaire boyfriend. Just consequences and a slow, unglamorous rebuilding. Sarah Jenkins was offered a position at Margaret Lawson's firm, a corner office, a salary that would have solved every financial problem she had. She turned it down. Instead, she opened a small practice specializing in representing women in coercive control cases. She called it Jenkins Family Law. Her first 3 clients came from the same shelter where Lydia had stayed. She worked from a real office now, not her kitchen table, but she kept the milk crates for her files because they reminded her of where she started. Her daughter Ellie colored at a small desk in the corner after school. On Sarah's wall was a framed note in Lydia's handwriting. "You were brave before anyone else was. Thank you." William Sharp retired from the Perry Systems Board. He did not give a farewell speech. He did not seek recognition. He spent his time volunteering for a domestic violence prevention nonprofit that Lydia helped fund with a portion of her settlement. He did not talk about his daughter Rebecca publicly. But once, at a fundraiser, someone asked him why he got involved. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "I could not help the first one. I promised myself there would not be a second." Ruth Bennett moved to Austin permanently. She rented a small house 3 blocks from Lydia's apartment, a 2-bedroom bungalow with a front porch and a garden where she grew tomatoes and basil and stubborn roses that bloomed in the Texas heat. Every morning, she walked over with coffee and helped with the baby. She had reclaimed the 3 years that Hayden stole from her, and she was not going to waste another minute. Lydia's apartment was in East Austin. 2 bedrooms, nothing fancy. The furniture was a mix of things she had bought at a second-hand store and things she had assembled herself from boxes with Swedish instructions. The bookshelves were full. The kitchen was small. The view from the living room window was a parking lot, and a taco truck, and, in the distance, the Austin skyline. On the wall, in a simple frame, was a photograph. Lydia and Ruth, at this hospital, the day Grace was born. Ruth is holding the baby. Lydia is lying in the hospital bed, exhausted, hair matted with sweat, smiling a smile that is so wide and so real that it looks like a different woman entirely. From the one who used to stand in a kitchen doorway with a dish towel, watching her husband take credit for her cooking. Lydia had sold her Perry System shares within the first year. She did not want to be tied to Hayden's world. She did not want board meetings or shareholder reports or any connection to the company that had been built on her algorithm and her silence. The money from the sale was enough to be secure, not rich, not wealthy, but free. She would never worry about rent or groceries or a $200 prepaid card again. She would never have to ask permission to eat ice cream at 2 in the morning. She went back to work. Not at the library Hayden had gotten her fired from. A different one. The Terrazas Branch Library on East First Street. A small neighborhood library with creaky floors and a children's section decorated with paper butterflies and construction paper suns. Lydia ran the children's reading program. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, she sat in a small chair in the children's section and read to kids. Picture books and chapter books and fairy tales and poetry. She did the voices, the dragon voice and the princess voice and the silly talking horse voice that made the 3-year-olds fall over laughing. She always had goldfish crackers in her desk drawer for after story time. Nobody at the library knew about Perry Systems. Nobody knew about post-nuptial agreements or billion-dollar settlements or offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. They just knew Miss Bennett, the librarian who loved books and children and quiet rooms, the woman who always stayed late to help someone find the right book, the woman who once shelved an entire cart of returns while singing "You Are My Sunshine" to the baby on her hip. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. It was evening, a Tuesday in January. The library had closed an hour ago, but Lydia had stayed late to reorganize the picture book shelf, which had been thoroughly rearranged by an enthusiastic 4-year-old who believed that all books should be sorted by the color of their covers, rather than by author name. Now the library was empty. The lights were dimmed. The heater hummed. Outside, through the tall windows, the Austin skyline was visible against a darkening sky. Somewhere out there, the Perry Systems tower still stood. The company logo glowing blue on the top floor. Lydia could see it from here if she looked. She did not look. She sat in the children's section in a small wooden chair designed for someone 3 feet tall and held her daughter on her lap. Grace was 3 months old. She had dark eyes and a startling amount of hair and tiny fingers that grabbed at everything within reach. She was wearing a yellow onesie and was wrapped in a blanket, a hand-knitted blanket with uneven stitches and slightly crooked edges. Donna's blanket. From the shelter. Lydia had kept it, of everything she owned, all the expensive things and the cheap things and the practical things. This blanket was the one she could not imagine being without, because it was made with kindness. And kindness, Lydia had learned, was the most valuable thing in the world. More valuable than algorithms and stock options and $12 million houses with cameras in every room. She opened a book, Goodnight Moon. She had read it to hundreds of children over the years. At the library, at story time, the same words over and over until they were part of her. But she had never read it to her own child before. Goodnight room, she read softly. Goodnight moon, goodnight cow jumping over the moon. Grace reached for the pages with her tiny fingers, trying to grab the pictures, the green room and the red balloon and the little old lady whispering hush. Lydia turned the pages slowly. She was in no hurry. There was nowhere else she needed to be. No nutritionist coming in the morning, no consultant monitoring her sleep, no cameras watching, no gate to lock her in, no man to make her small. She finished the book. She closed it gently and set it on the shelf beside her. She held Grace against her chest, the baby's heartbeat against her own. Two hearts, beating in the quiet of a library, surrounded by books and silence and the smell of old paper. "I named you Grace," Lydia whispered into her daughter's hair. "Because even in the worst year of my life, grace is what got me through. Not revenge, not anger, not money, just grace. One breath at a time, one day at a time, one small act of kindness from a stranger in a shelter who knitted you a blanket." Grace yawned. A tiny, enormous yawn that scrunched her whole face. "And I want you to know something, little one. Something I wish someone had told me when I was young. You will never have to make yourself small for anyone. Not for a man, not for money, not for the world. You do not have to earn the right to take up space. You do not have to solve someone else's problems to deserve love. You are enough just as you are. You will always be enough." Grace's eyes fluttered closed. Her tiny fist clutched the collar of Lydia's shirt. Her breathing slowed, deepened, became the steady rhythm of a baby who feels safe. Lydia sat in the small chair in the quiet library and held her sleeping daughter and did not move. Outside, the sky had gone dark. The city lights were on. The Perry Systems tower glowed blue against the night. Lydia did not look at it. She had everything she needed right here. Lydia Bennett did not win because she was a genius. She did not win because she had a secret weapon or a countdown clock or a billion-dollar brain. She won because she refused to disappear, because a mother flew 1,200 miles on a moment's notice and slept in a budget motel and timed the security cameras, because a young lawyer with a 4-year-old daughter and a jammed printer risked her career for a woman she had just met, because an old man on a board remembered his daughter and decided, not again. Never again. Hayden Perry learned the most expensive lesson of his life. You cannot own someone who knows their own worth. You cannot cage someone who remembers how to think. You cannot erase someone who has people willing to stand in parking lots and courtrooms and shelters and say, "I see you. I believe you. You are not crazy. You are not alone." And Lydia did not just win a divorce case. She won back the life that was taken from her. Not the big, glamorous life with the mansion and the Porsche and the name on a brass plaque. The small life, the real life, the life with mismatched furniture and goldfish crackers and a baby blanket with uneven stitches. The life where she gets to choose what to eat for dinner and where to go on Saturday and who to call on the phone. The life where she is not a wife or an asset or an appendage, but a person. A full, complete, free person. She named her daughter Grace. And every Tuesday and Thursday, she reads to her in a library that smells like old paper and new beginnings. If this story touched you, leave a comment below and tell me, what would you have done in Lydia's place? Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because next week we have a story that will make your jaw hit the floor. Until then, remember this. The quietest people in the room are often the ones holding all the cards. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.